World War II heroes, a Who Do You Think You Are episode review, and behind the history of a surname. Stick around for all this and more with the Family History Show with Findmypast. Hello everybody, welcome to the Family History Show with Findmypast. My name is Ellie, I am social media manager at Findmypast, and welcome. I am one of your co-hosts for today, and we also have the lovely Liam, who I think I'm pointing to the right way. Am I pointing to the right way, Liam?
Yeah,
it's different on your screen. This is going to be interesting.
That was fun. No pointing at each other then. But yeah, other than that, hello everybody.
How are you doing today, Liam?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. How are you?
I'm a little bit worse for wear, actually. So I just want to apologise for my general appearance and the sound of my voice. I think I'm fighting off a cold. So I hope everybody else is well. I hope none of you are getting sick. That would be absolutely rubbish. But yeah, it's Friday. It's time for the Family History Show. We do this every 2 weeks at Findmypast, and Liam and I delve into like TV and film reviews that are to do with history or family history. We look at fun stuff like surnames. We do things like on this day in history and all of that jazz. It's all fun. It's all nice and lighthearted. Actually, that's a little bit of a lie. Sometimes it's not lighthearted, but we bring it back to something that's fun and lighthearted, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's welcome some of you guys already joining us in the comments today. We've got Janet in a breezy and sunny North Wales. I'm in North Wales, Janet. It's not sunny. It's just breezy and it's cold. I've been cold all day. Loads of people here. We've got Gillian with us in Edinburgh. Hello. Hello, Jan. It was so nice to see you yesterday, Jan. It was so lovely to see you. I love seeing you guys in real life. It makes me really happy. We had, for those of you who don't know, we had our Heritage Open Days event yesterday at Colk Abbey in Derbyshire, and it was so, so good. Yeah, Liam, you weren't there, and I'm really sad you weren't there.
No, I was jealous seeing all the pictures, seeing all those pictures again. But I will say, seeing those easels with the board set up gave me a little bit of PTSD from the Women's Prize event. They were a nightmare to set up. So part of me was very gutted. Part of me was quite glad because, yeah, I did not want to have to deal with setting those up again. So I don't envy you there, but yeah.
That's because at the Women's Prize event, we were outside and the wind kept knocking them off.
It still is there, though. Even the sight of them in that picture just sent shivers down my spine.
We've got Jackie joining us for the first time today. Hello, we're so glad you could join us. Tell us a bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your ancestors, your research. We have a fantastic supportive community of people in the comments. So you are joining these people for the first time. So welcome. We're so excited to have you. Lovely. Liam, I believe you are driving the slides today, and could you bring those up and we can run through today's agenda of, yeah, it's very packed today. So yeah, we're going to do a little review of a Who Do You Think You Are episode. We're going to do Mel C's episode from a couple of weeks ago. Because the Family History Show is fortnightly, we actually have some time to catch up, and it means that hopefully we won't be spoiling the episode for you this time like we did with the first episode for anybody who hadn't seen it. Yay! Then we're going to do question of the week. And the question of the week this week is, how was your family affected by the Second World War? What is their story? So whatever you'd like to share or discuss, please feel free to do so. We'll come along to those in a little while. Then we're going to have a look at some World War II heroes, and we're going to do this from the lens of a film that is out today. It's Kate Winslet's new film, Lee. And from the first moment that I watched the trailer for the first time, I knew I had to look into this. I knew I had to talk about it with you guys and with Liam, and I'm very excited to see this film. I've not seen it obviously because it's just out today. And then to round things off, we're going to do a new segment called Behind the Name, and we're going to look at the history behind a surname. Could it be yours? Stick around to find out. There we go. Does that sound good, Liam?
That sounds very good. I was distracted for the last bit because I was so enthralled by the lens pun that you made for the Lee film. So that was the last bit.
Did I make a pun?
You said through the lens, and I thought like through the lens of a new film. And because the film's about photography, I was just enthralled by that pun, by that.
That was so unintentional.
Oh, come on. You knew what you were doing.
I've lost the plot. I'm not even lying. I've absolutely lost the plot. So that's the plan for today, you guys. Keep your questions of the week coming in. I can see Karen's already put hers in, which is excellent. Gina says, I like the look of the film, Lee, and I can't wait to see it. I think we should just organise a group trip and go together. So if somebody can pinpoint a cinema that's easily accessible to all of us, then we'll all go together. I think that'd be great. Should we talk about who do you think you are, Liam?
Yeah, absolutely. We're a few weeks behind, which, like you say, might be, it's a benefit in some ways, but it also feels like so long ago that I'm struggling to remember it as well. So we're no spoilers, but it might be a spoiler for me because it'll be like I'm watching it all over again.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. So we'll talk a little bit about Melanie C's episode. And I don't know if anybody is in listening today is my age in their early 30s and, grew up with the Spice Girls. So this was quite an exciting episode for me because, I grew up with the Spice Girls, big part of my childhood, and really nice to see her delve into her roots a little bit. So that was really nice. And what I thought, Liam, I don't know about you, but I got a sense that when you've not got, I don't know how to quite phrase this. So when you've not got like a traditional family setup, when you've got, step parents and step siblings or half siblings, that can, that adds a sort of an extra complexity to doing your family history, I think. And it was nice that they were able to touch on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's kind of like one of the benefits of Who Do You Think You Are, that you do see those family dynamics that are different from your own, and like say the way that impacts research in ways that you would never have thought about for your own family, like say whether it's step parents or half siblings, whatever it might be. It's a nice kind of different look at things, like you say, and it was nice that they touched on that in the episode as well, like you say as well.
Yeah, and what I always love about Who Do You Think You Are is that they always start when you sort of delve into the family archive as it stands. So photographs and documents that are held by the star or the guest's parents or aunts and uncles or grandparents. It's nice when they start going through those. And it did get me thinking, I don't know about you, how many of us, when we come to our family history, know nothing beyond our grandparents? I think that's quite a few of us.
Yeah, I certainly knew one great grandparent, like knew of one great grandparent, but other than that, very, very little, I would say. Even my own granddad, when I first started out family history, I think I've said before, my first goal was to find his grandparents' names. So I don't think anyone in the family really knew. So yeah, it's interesting that.
Yeah, like you, I knew one great grandparent and couldn't really have told you the names of the others. And it's only when I started asking questions that you start to get some answers, but then you don't get all the answers, and then you have to go look for yourself because you've caught the genealogy bug. Oh no, what a shame. Yes, and then we do have, I think I brought up put some records onto the slides if you want to pop those up, because it's nice seeing the records that we use day to day when we do our family history research, being used on screen on the TV. But I think it's always nice to come back to them because we can maybe pick them apart a little bit more. So I think this is the 1911 census. Yes, 1911 census for Mel's paternal grandmother, who's Catherine Chisholm, known as Nanny Kay, and you also get her parents on here, Mary and Thomas Bilborough. And already here, because Melanie already had the surname Flaherty. Is that how you pronounce it? I have no idea how you pronounce it, Liam. You'll know better than me.
Hoping you weren't going to ask me this because those sounds have always kind of thrown me off. I would say Flaherty.
Flaherty, okay. I'm probably going to forget that and go back to how I originally. Apologies.
I might be wrong too. So maybe we're both wrong.
So it immediately, looking at this one census record, that confirms that connection there, and immediately you see that Mary, who's the great grandmother, was married twice, basically. Like looking at this one record almost confirms that for you, and then you obviously go and check it with other records and things like that. So yeah, if we flick forward, I did wonder whether we could find them in the 1921 census, because they didn't feature this on the show, which I don't really blame them for doing, because it doesn't really tell us much more, but I thought it'd be good to touch on here. So we can find them in 1921. We find Mary with her second husband, Thomas. They have 9 children altogether, I think. And so there's some children listed here, and they've also got some boarders, which I found curious, because perhaps that's just another source of money to be coming in. What did you think?
Yeah, I think it's always interesting with boarders on census records. I have not come across any in my own family tree, unfortunately, but I always like the idea of investigating the boarders and seeing, are they just people that are just happen to be staying there? Is there a relationship somewhere down the line? Obviously, the surnames are like the 3 Johnsons as the boarders. Is there a Johnson? Is that, you know what I mean? I think it's interesting, that side of things. But yeah, like you're saying, this particular 1921 census record, looking at it again, might be one of the most bare ones that I've seen. There is very little information on here. Even the occupation, the employment section, place of work is very bare, I would say, from what I'm used to seeing.
Yeah. So I think that's exactly the reason why I'm not surprised they didn't show it, to be fair. It doesn't really lend much else to the story. But they did show the 1939 register, if you flick over to the next slide, because this is where the really key bit of information came in, was Mary being listed as a moneylender. And I just found her story really, really fascinating. Like, I've never come across a moneylender who was a woman in my own tree. And it's just, it's quite nice to see her sort of like taking charge. And this is around at a time where you don't, even if women were taking charge at this time, you don't really read about it. There's not really much to go on here, because women are sometimes lost from the records. They don't quite appear, their stories don't quite appear as men's do. So this was a nice thing to see, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, like you say, a moneylender of any description in the family tree is quite interesting, but especially in this particular circumstance, I think it just adds another layer of interest almost with that occupation, with the story behind her as well.
Yeah, I think that's, I do have some more slides to show in a second, but if you want to drop them off for a second, just so everybody can see my tired face on a slightly bigger screen. What else I quite liked about this episode was there was some really good learning nuggets for anybody who's just starting out, or perhaps, you know, needs a bit of refresher on, you know, where to look outside your traditional census records and your birth records and things like that, because they talked about probate records, and I find these particularly good, because if you're hunting for somebody's death record and you don't really want to spend the money on a certificate to order it, you need really another way to confirm that that is the right person. So there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can look in the newspapers to see if there's an announcement of that person's passing, or a funeral announcement to confirm the location and the right time in history. But what you can also do is you can look at probate records, and you might end up having to look through 10 different ones for the same name to find the right person. But one of the ways you can confirm this is that you can look at the address of where they died, so where their residence was, and who was named on their probate. So if this is a spouse or a child, for example, or a sibling, you can match it up that way. And this is exactly what I saw them do in this episode. So that was good to see. Do you use probate records much, Liam?
You know, it's one of those things, I'm sure I've said this exact line before when we're speaking about them in the past, maybe when we'd updated a collection or something, but it's something I always mean to go back and check, because for whatever reason, I didn't do it in my first sort of round. So it's something I always need to go back and check, because like I say, when we're looking at them for research purposes, or when I was with customer support and I was helping people use them, they're obviously so interesting, and even things like, say, the address, the next of kin, that sort of information can be really useful as well, on top of what is in the probate itself. So yeah, it's another reminder, probably an annual reminder at this point, for me to go back and actually have a look into them this time.
Yeah. I find them really useful. It's one of the things, like if I'm trying to confirm a death or somebody disappears from the records, and I would expect them to be, for example, in a census, I will go and have a look at the probate records. I find them very, very valuable. I apologize for my voice, everybody. And then the other thing, because they sort of shifted to the Irish side, didn't they, Liam? And you're much more well versed in Irish family history than I am. But what I was really pleased that they didn't shy away from the tragedy and the heartache and the suffering of the Irish famine, and how that caused such movement. You had people going over to the States and coming into the UK and going over to Australia, for example. I found that very poignant, and I'm really pleased they touched on it, actually.
Yeah, I think you find that with a lot of shows like this, even perhaps previous episodes of Who Do You Think You Are, that so many people have an Irish background, and so much of that comes from, like you say, the movement that came from the famine. So but it's not always explained there. It's always just, oh, at one point your family came to Liverpool or wherever it might be. But like you say, like the detail they went into was a nice touch as well.
Yeah. Apparently Linda's an island. Oh, how nice.
Right on time.
Oh, I hope you're having a great time, Linda. I want to go to Ireland. Basically. So yeah, I thought that was really, really interesting. And how many of us have an Irish connection? Or somebody, ancestors who were affected by the famine? I imagine it's quite a few of us, in fact.
I know, even when you think about in the context of Who Do You Think You Are, like, when's the last time an episode went by without Ireland being mentioned at some point? Like, so many of them have Irish connections as well, which, yeah, like you say, is no surprise, really.
Yeah. And if you just throw up the records again, because then the episode shifted again and they moved away from Mary and the Irish connection. And then they started focusing on, because Mel was very interested to see if her family history was really rooted in Liverpool and how far back that went. And, a researcher showed her family tree, and then suddenly we're back in Devon. And I found this guy's story absolutely fascinating. And it's a testament to how rewarding it is when we can come across a character. And I put that in inverted commas. So somebody who did something that means that they're talked about more, that they appear in documents and records more. That's quite exciting, whether it's for good or ill. It's really valuable, because you not only learn about them, but you learn about the people connected to them. So, and what they did, and their movements, and their associates. And I just think I just find it very useful, personally.
Yeah, like you say, it's the person we all want to find, isn't it? The person that all over the newspapers or all over court records or whatever it might be. It's that you're looking for, that stories.
Well, that's exactly what this newspaper report is. And I think they did touch on this in the episode, because there's a couple of mentions of Thomas Daniel Keefe, who I think is her 4 times great-grandfather. And the general story was that he was working in insurance, wasn't he? And that he was accused of fraud, and it was basically going to ruin his life. And this is the whole trial is in the newspapers, and we get I say his exact words as they were recorded by whoever came to write them down. But we hear his voice here. We hear him speak, and it's really special when you can find things like this.
Just looking at this article again, I was just thinking that how much I love these types of articles about court cases when there's almost very little reporting. It's just Mr. Moore said this, and then Mr. Pigeon said this, and then Mr. Keefe said this, and it's like you say, it's the words from their mouth, or so we're led to believe, as you say, with a bit of journalistic flavor thrown in, perhaps. But yeah, it's just really cool seeing it like that conversation in the newspaper.
And when I clipped this article, I'm going to have to come in very close here to read it. I apologise. I wanted to include the line at the end that says, "Mr. Keefe, that I object to. It is false." You know, because he, I think he was actually innocent, and it did mean that this trial saw his life take a different turn, and that's how he ended up in Liverpool. And the story just came to life in the newspapers. And when you find an article like this, when you've got quotes and a whole trial and the goings on, it's just, honestly, it's just like gold dust, to be honest. Yeah, I can see Kim and Karen both saying that newspapers are really useful for their research. I don't think I could do research without newspapers anymore.
Definitely not.
Definitely not. And how fun was it to see Mel use a microfilm reader as well?
Yeah, I know. I speak about that, but I've spoken about that before as well, where I love newspapers, obviously, and I love sitting just searching them and seeing what comes up. But seeing her flicking through that did feel quite nostalgic in a sense. I do remember doing that as a kid in the library. Don't get me wrong, from a research perspective, I don't envy people that do that, but it was, as I say, quite nostalgic in a sense. It felt very old school when you're so used to who do you think you are, people just whipping out a laptop in a coffee shop and it's in front of them. It was cool seeing that.
Yeah, and I think it's a good reminder as well of that digitized records are so handy, but sometimes you do have to go old school because not everything is online, and never expect everything to be online because you're just going to miss things. Sometimes you do need to go back to basics, I suppose.
Yeah. Old school, I think, is a good, I'm going to start quoting you in that for a family history tip. Sometimes you have to go old school.
Sometimes you have to go old school. And the other thing that I thought was a very, very timely reminder is around name variants, because Thomas was Thomas Keefe, and then he seemed to change it to O'Keefe. So when people, whether they do it on purpose or whether they do it gradually, completely by accident, or it's somebody else writing their name for them, slight changes in name can be tricky to trace, but not impossible. And I think it's a good reminder that you should use other corresponding clues. So whether it's occupations, whether it's addresses, whether it's other family members or associates, you can still do it, even when there's an entire surname change. There was some bit of research I was working on ages ago, and somebody changed their name almost entirely. And bar one tiny little note on a much bigger record that says that they changed their name, I wouldn't have put these two people together and realized they were the same person. So it can be done, but the evidence needs to be there to begin with.
Yeah.
And Andrew says also the Anglicization of Irish names. Yeah, you're spot on. It does happen. Anglicization of names all over the shop happens. I see it a lot with Welsh names as well.
Yeah,
I prefer them to stay Welsh personally. Just because I'm like that. And I don't know about you, but I found it super inspiring to see that Mel's ancestor Thomas fought for more adult men to have the right to vote and for it to be anonymous. And just because this guy had come from almost nothing, he'd gone to, he'd been in a workhouse and he had been accused of something that he didn't do. He almost lost his livelihood. Then he sort of reinvented himself and came back stronger. And he didn't just go, okay, I'm working for myself because, I've been done bad, or however you want to describe it. I'm gonna I'm gonna drag myself back up, but I'm gonna bring everybody else with me, and I quite liked that.
Yeah, because like you say, things could have gone a totally different direction. I think I personally would have seen myself being a little bit more stubborn in that situation and maybe not following the same path he did, but who could have blamed me? But yeah, it was an interesting path, and it's a movement you don't hear too much about either as well. So it was interesting from an historical perspective as well.
Yeah, and just to round off my thoughts on what was an episode I didn't expect to like, actually, but not because of who it was, but I don't know. I didn't expect it to have a lasting impact on me. And what I quite liked, that it was a little bit of a love letter to Liverpool as well, and how in the face of adversity, when you've got things that drive you to Liverpool, it's sort of a symbol of hope and the fact that things can change for the better.
Yeah, it's a story I'm sure people, like say, it resonates with us, but I'm sure people in Liverpool and similar areas, that it meant a lot to them as well. So I do like that aspect of Who Do You Think You Are, the sort of the local pride that a lot of people have as well, and their ties to the place they're from.
Yeah. And I think we're going to have, next time we do the Family History Show, we'll review Rose Ayling Ellis's episode, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Last night's one that was actually on was Dame Jessica Ennis-Hills, wasn't it? Which I haven't watched yet.
No.
So there we go.
What a catch to do.
Yeah, and it gives you time as well to make sure that you're up to date on the episodes as well. So we're not inadvertently spoiling episodes for you, which is not what we want to do. But yeah, we'd really be interested in hearing your thoughts on Mel C's episode as well. And yeah, I'm just so glad we've got Who Do You Think You Are to talk about again. I love it when it comes back on the telly.
What are we going to do? Fill half an hour.
We'll find something else. We'll find something else to chat about, I'm sure. Shall we do Question of the Week?
Yes, absolutely.
While you pop the slide up, I'm just going to put the link to our Who Do You Think You Are review blog that our colleague Daisy updates every week. So I'm just going to pop that in the chat. And then if anybody wants to go and have a gander at that, they're more than welcome to. Okay, so this week's question of the week is, how was your family affected by the Second World War, and what is their story? While I start delving into them a little bit, Liam, maybe think if you have an answer to this, and I'll come back to you.
You're going to ask this. You're going to ask this.
You need to be prepared.
I know. The only thing I can think of is my grandfather was born in 1936 in Greenwich to Irish parents, and they're on the 1939 register in Hastings. But then not too long after, they went back to Ireland, I understand. It's not in the records, but that's what the story would say. So the only thing I can think of is that they were getting out of the surrounding London area and going back to northwest Ireland, where it was presumably a much safer place to be during World War II than the outskirts of London would have been. So that was the only kind of story I could think that would be somewhat related to us and the movements that my family made in the world.
Yeah. And then for me, I had one grandparent who was a soldier, and then my other grandparents, my maternal grandparents were quite young, and then any of my great grandparents, they would have been, the men would have been too old. So the only person that actually fell into the bracket of being a soldier was my paternal grandfather. And I learned very recently that his older half brother was in the same regiment as him and enlisted around the same sort of time. So that was nice to see. He came home as well, which is good. Okay, let's have a look at your answers to the question of the week. So Karen says, missed out mostly on military service because of ages. One grandfather was a fireman and the other an ARP warden in the city of London. I I always come back to the war on the home front and how things could have been so much worse were it not for volunteers like your grandfathers who were a fireman and an ARP warden. They did such important work, basically, and I tip my hat to them. Is that the correct phrase? I'm very grateful to them.
Yeah.
Rita says, I'm going to sneeze. My father. Can you read this one? I'm going to sneeze.
Is that what Rita said? I don't think that's what Rita said. Rita said, my father was in the US Navy in the Pacific Theater. I had several uncles who served in the army. One was supposedly a prisoner of war in Europe, but I've been having issues finding out more information due to record destruction. So yeah, that's one thing. As soon as you mentioned prisoner of war, I thought about those prisoner of war records, which again come up on Who Do You Think You Are this season with Vicky McClure and her ancestor. And I know they can be quite an emotional find for a lot of people as well. But like say, a lot of them were destroyed as well. So it can still be tricky to find that out, even though such a vast collection exists. There's obviously so many more that don't exist, sadly. So yeah, it'd be a poignant thing to find out more about, I think.
Yeah, it's a difficult experience to go through researching something like that. But I don't know if rewarding is the right word. Mm-hmm. I think having a sense of closure, perhaps. I think it'll be different for everybody.
Yeah, I think thinking so much about that Vicky McClure episode and that sort of physical experience that she had with it as well.
I absolutely sobbed watching that episode. I am not ashamed to say it. I sobbed. Janet says, my grandparents had a bomb in their garden. They were out at the time. Goodness me, thank goodness for that. My mum was working in a factory hit by a V1. 33 died, 200 injured, and she was okay apart from achy ears. It's just
incredible numbers to think about as well, isn't it? 33 casualties, 200 injuries is just an insane number of people to think about from one incident like that. And yeah, like you say, thank God they were out at the time, and that even having gone through that, she was okay as well.
Yeah, one factory, and that was the devastation that was wrought. It's it's scary stuff, really. Okay, scrolling on, we've got Nicole. We're going to have to peek up over the top of this. Both my family served in World War II. It mostly affected my great uncle on my dad's father's side, as he had been a prisoner of war when in Italy, got captured, managed to escape, was recaptured. The family rumour was that he'd been captured as our last name sounded German. He never spoke about this time, which of his time serving, which I can understand, absolutely. But I can't access his record till 2030 because of medical issues. What a shame. And there's no way around this, Nicole. Darn. Not long to wait, though. Just, a very simple 6 years. Apparently. Kim says, my great-grandmother was affected by World War II. She lived in Bethnal Green, had 3 sons in the army. 2 were captured. 1 sent to a Stalag camp, and the other 2, Sandakan. I don't even know how to pronounce that, in the Far East. She died soon after reading out the latter one's fate. Oh, that's so sad. It's just, was any family not? How do I phrase this? Was there any family that was not touched by the war, basically? Because I would struggle to find one. Ellen says, my mum watched her older brothers go to war. They never said much outside of rationing. My dad finished high school and joined the Navy at the very end of the war. That's another thing we sometimes forget about is rationing, and that, like, the land army and making sure that the country was fed, and yeah.
I know, like, as soon as you hear Second World War, you automatically go soldiers, prisoners of war, etc. But like, say, we spoke about the ARP already, talking about rationing, talking about how people in this country were affected as much as those who were away fighting as well. So yeah, it's incredible to think.
Yeah, what about the people left behind who had to wait for news every day, basically waiting for bad news. And all the while, there's, cities nearby being bombed. And yeah, I promise that this whole episode of the Family History Show isn't going to be sad. But it's still important that we don't shy away from these sorts of things. There's still important stories to mention, even if they make us sad, even if they make us want to cry, and that's all okay. That's all okay. Gosh, I sound like Jen. I've just realised I just sound like Jen.
Not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing at all. She says hi to you all, by the way. I saw her yesterday and the day before. She's good. Okay, let's move on, because we are already at 25 to the hour and we still have 2 whole segments to do. In fact, I think we might have to move on and then come back and do some of these at the end if we have time. Yeah, let's do that. Okay. So the next thing we wanted to touch on today was in connection with the question of the week, which is around World War II heroes. So there's a new film out today called Lee, and it charts the story of a woman called Lee Miller, or Elizabeth Miller. And she was an American model turned photographer, and she became Vogue's war correspondent during the Second World War. And this film just looks so good. It looks like it's going to tick so many boxes for me. It's got Kate Winslet, it's got Andy Samberg, and it looks like it's, yeah, I'm just very excited to see it, and I think it's probably gonna make me cry, but that's okay. It's a valid thing to do, crying. I'm trying to tell myself this, and I'll tell all of you that as well. I cry like every day. It's not even funny. And I thought, because I'm very excited about it, and obviously Liam's very excited about it too, aren't you, Liam?
I am actually. I know that was maybe slightly sarcastic, but as soon as you sent me the trailer or the Wikipedia page, whichever one came first, and said it looked good, and I was like, that actually does sound really good.
So I thought what we could do is just chat a little bit about the real story behind this film. Just as one example, I think, of heroism and bravery during the Second World War. I mean, we've been talking about your ancestors' heroism, and now we're going to talk about this woman, and I just think she sounds incredible. We have made a collection on Findmypast of newspaper clippings that we have found relating to Lee and her work. Liam, if you could pop that in the chat for me. And thank you very much. And then I'll just bring the slides back up, and I would like you to meet Lee Miller. So she was born Elizabeth Miller, and she's pictured here with some other female US war correspondents. And this is just before they headed over to mainland Europe. So she was born in Poughkeepsie in New York in 1907, and her father was quite into photography. So she was exposed to photography at quite a young age. And some years later, I think she must have been about 17 or 18 at the time. The story goes she was out in the road, I think in New York, and she was saved from an oncoming vehicle by Condé Nast, as in the Condé Nast. And from there, she became a model. She became very in demand. And if we just flick over to the next slide, we can actually see her on 3 different census records with her parents and her siblings. So her parents were Theodore and Florence. I think Theodore had, I want to say, German ancestry, I seem to think. But yeah, she modeled, but I think her true passion did seem to be photography. So she headed to Paris and practically marched up to the surrealist Man Ray and demanded, "You will take me as your student," even though he was just, apparently, he said, "No, I'm not taking any students, not taking any." She's like, no, I am now your student. So she became his student, this vivacious woman, and also his sort of subject and his model, and also his lover as well. And then so she spent some time in Paris, and then she returned to New York. She set up her own photography studio, and one of her clients was actually the Elizabeth Arden, which I thought was amazing. And then she married an Egyptian called Aziz Eloubey, and then at that point she gave up her studio and then moved to Egypt and lived in Cairo with her husband. But she quickly became bored with life in Cairo, even though she was still doing her photography a little bit. So she returned to Paris, and then she met another surrealist, a British man called Roland Penrose. And if we flick over to the next slide, this is where we find her at the beginning of the Second World War, because she does appear, believe it or not, in the 1939 register. And I was over the moon to find this, because as an American, I thought I wouldn't find her in any of these sorts of records, but I did find her. I was so happy. So we find her living with Roland in Downshire House in Hampstead on the 1939 register. We can see an image of it here. It's from the English Heritage website. And so war had just broken out. This is the 29th of September 1939, and her family wanted her to come back to the US. But she stayed in the UK, and she began using her photography to document the Blitz, in effect. And by 1942, she became the official war correspondent and photojournalist for Vogue, and was also accredited by the US Army. How cool is that, Liam?
That's, yeah, what a story, like you say, and that just resilience that she had such a life going to Egypt and then thinking, this is a bit dull for me, actually, I need to be in amongst it, coming back over, and then, like you say, staying where it was perhaps most dangerous in the UK at the time, in the centre of London, documenting the Blitz. And something I didn't even think about was how all-encompassing the war would have been for media at the time. Because when you sent me this initially, my first thought was Vogue had a war correspondent. Like, you think about Vogue magazine nowadays, and it had a World War II correspondent. I think that was just, yeah, like you say, something I hadn't thought about, that obviously it overtook all media outlets regardless of what they used to cover.
Yeah, and I had exactly the same reaction. I've got goosebumps now just thinking about it. And it reminds me of today when journalists go to war zones to capture the truth. And it's so dangerous for them. And they do incredible work. And I'm very grateful to them, because it means that I get that, although I don't like to see it, I get that unpolished view and into a war zone. And because I don't like feeling like I don't want to shy away from it. Like I want to know, like tell me the bad stuff, because I think it's an immense privilege when we can say, oh no, that doesn't affect me, I'm going to turn it off. And like, no, I want to know. So thank you to, very unlikely that any journalists in war zones are currently listening, but we see you and we thank you. So yes, so this is where she is at the beginning of the war. And, it's now 1942. If you just flick over to the next slide, I think we've actually got an image of, so this is her accreditation with the US Army as a war correspondent. And you've got a description of her there. You've got blue eyes, you've got her light hair, you've got her weight, you've got her height, her date of birth. And I think she would have had to carry this with her. This was, I found this in a 2002 newspaper, in our newspaper collection. I did have to do a bit of jiggery pokery to lighten it, because it was quite, the image was quite dark. So yeah, we're 1942, and she decides to go over to mainland Europe to start documenting the war. She takes herself into a war zone, basically. And during her time over there, she photographed nurses, D-Day, I think, the liberation of Paris, St. Malo, and also some of her photos have been reproduced in newspapers. So I've been able to show some of these. Excuse me, if you just flick over to the next slide. So this is just a small handful. There's actually a whole archive online. If you go to leemiller.org, you can see her photographs. They are just incredible. So there's just a few here. There's one here of Fred Astaire as he waited backstage to entertain the troops. I think this was after the liberation of Paris. And she was particularly interested in women and the effects of war on women and nurses, as you can see here. So there's two shots there. But I think possibly the most famous photo, I don't know if you'd ever seen this before, Liam, because I certainly hadn't. If you flick over to the next slide, is this very striking photograph of Lee in a bathtub. But it's not just any bathtub. So Lee's sort of right-hand man partner when she was over in mainland Europe was a life photographer called David Sherman, and he's played by Andy Samberg in the film. So at some point they ended up in Munich in April 1945, and it happened to be the day that Hitler killed himself. And David took this very, very striking photo of Lee in a bathtub in Hitler's Munich apartment. This is Hitler's bath.
And yeah, it's just, I think this was on the webpage you initially sent me about it, and that's the only time I'd seen it and never heard the story before. But yeah, it's just an incredible story behind the photograph.
Yeah, so you've got a picture of him there, and the composition of this photograph. I was reading about, like, they purposely put her muddy boots on the bath mat, and apparently she slept in his bed that night as well. Little bit weird, but the photograph, very, very striking.
Yeah.
It just sort of stops you in your tracks a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, like you say, it's an interesting photograph initially, and then you hear the story behind it. You start noticing, like you say, like the picture of him there in the muddy boots and the mud on the bath mat and everything like that. It's, incredible picture.
Yeah. But she also documented through her work as well the liberation of 2 concentration camps, and after the war she basically had to campaign to see those photographs published, because she was concerned that the atrocities that took place in some of these camps, some of them, all of them, what am I talking about, would just be hushed up, or people wouldn't know about them. And she felt, no, people need to know this. So yeah, she campaigned to make sure that the photographs were published. And she then divorced her first husband because she found out she was pregnant with her son, who was going to be, he was born Anthony in 1947. And so she married Roland Penrose, who was the father. And yeah, I know that she suffered from depression later in her life because of what she saw and what she experienced. I think she turned to drinking, which, I mean, who can blame her really? But I just think, what an incredible woman. And I'm so excited to see this film. I'm so excited to see, and this is, pun intended, a different lens on World War II. Yeah, I'm very excited to see it.
I know. When you said that this is what we were going to speak about this week, I was like, I wonder if I can go see the film, but it's only in my cinema as of tonight, so I'll have to report back on the film itself. But yeah, incredible story. Film looks really good as well, so can't wait.
Yeah. Right, we have 10 minutes left. Do we think we can squeeze in a surname?
I'm just the co-host today. You're driving today, so it's up to you.
Yeah, let's see if I can race through. We can race through this, and then we'll see if we can get some more questions of the week done at the end. Because I don't know about you, Liam, but I think for some people, wanting to know the history behind your surname and where it came from or how it evolved is one of the reasons many people start family history in the first place. You know, there's a whole sort of branch of genealogy which is like one name studies. Mm-hmm. There's the Guild of One Name Studies. So I think a lot of people find it very interesting. I certainly find it very interesting. Have you ever wondered where Boyle comes from, for example?
See, it's one of those things that I've always just known. I've known it to be an Irish last name without thinking too much else about it. But I only, like I say, I know it's Irish. I know in Donegal, it's every, 2 out of 3 people seem to be called Boyle. So I'm assuming it's somewhere in that part of Ireland as well. But yeah, you don't really think too much about other than that, it's an Irish last name. I know that much.
Yeah. And because I was out at an event yesterday, I didn't have much time to prep this, so I just literally pulled a name from my family tree. I'm really sorry. I won't do this again. I'll pick a random one next time. But I'm going to do Molyneux or Molyneux because I find this surname utterly fascinating. So my on my dad's side, my 2 times great grandmother was born Hannah Molyneux, and I think she married my 2 times great grandfather, although I have never found I've never found a corresponding marriage. But she's named on all the kids' birth certificates, so that's close enough for me. So when I started putting this together, I thought, well, where do you even start when you want to research a surname? And I think a good starting point is actually our surnames page on Findmypast. So if you go over onto the next slide for me, you can basically just add in your surname, and it will just pull some very, very top level information on what we have in our records that you can use to explore the history of your surname. So if I add in Molyneux, if you flick over one more, it tells me that there's about 27,000 records for people with this surname. So that gives me an indication. It tells me that most people live in London, and that you can, if you just go back to the map a sec. So these are basically like census maps, and it tries to pinpoint roughly where most of the people with this surname can be found for each census year. You can actually filter it by different census years there. And then it gives us some common facts as well. One of which, if you go back to that next slide for me, one of these is actually true. So like, who were Molyneux's most likely to marry? Joneses and Smiths. Yeah, my Hannah Molyneux married Hugh Jones. So there you go. And we also get some common jobs over on the next slide. I just put in the one for women in census records here, but there was also some facts for men as well. And you can see here that, you know, quite a lot of these Molyneux were working class. And I sometimes think as well, I don't know about you, Liam, but you can do quite a bit with the sounding of a surname and the spelling variations. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is obviously a very good example when it comes to sounds and spellings, because if you asked me to spell Molyneux, I probably wouldn't have done it that way exactly. And even the way you said it at the start would differ to how I just said it there. So I think, yeah, especially with a surname like this, my surname is quite run-of-the-mill. Boyle and Jones, for example, are going to be quite one track. But yeah, like I say, this is a perfect example for that, because I'm sure there's 5 different pronunciations and spellings that people in the chat could come away with in the next minute or so as well. So yeah, it's interesting.
Well, I looked it up. There's actually about 15 to 20 spelling variations for this surname, at least.
Yeah,
those are just the ones that I found listed. And I think it's French. What about you? If you look at this, I thought French.
French would always be I think the new sound at the end would always kind of ring French. Am I thinking of something else? Is there a Shakespeare character called Molyneux?
Oh, I don't know.
Or am I thinking of something else? I don't know why I voiced that opinion as if I know anything about Shakespeare, but as soon as the surname came up, it kind of clicked in my head something to do with Shakespeare from high school. But I might be totally off the mark there, or close, but no cigar on that one.
Well, when I Google this, it's apparently one of the translations is Mill of the Waters, I think. And one of the theories, because there are various theories that I think you do have to take with not even a pinch of salt, like a bag of salt.
Yeah.
That one theory is that the Molyneux came from France in medieval times, and one of these branches that settled became the Earls of Sefton in Lancashire. And I think 1 or 2 of them may have been Crusaders as well. And there's another Lancashire line, and then I want to say a Nottinghamshire line, and then there's some Irish connection there as well, which I wasn't entirely certain on. And my Molyneux are actually from Cheshire, and I've really struggled to research them, actually. I thought I found her parents at one point, but I think I was actually barking up the wrong tree, and I think I'm incorrect. But she did have Hannah, my 2 times great grandmother, on the 1871 census. She's got a relative living with her called Sarah Molyneux, and there's no indication of how they are related, only that they are related. So that's at least a little bit of a clue. And I think the next thing for me is how far can you take a surname back in the family history records? So some of the things I like to look at are memorial inscriptions, wills, and then books and articles. So if you go onto the next slide for me, there's a publication here about Lancashire fines from 1196 to 1377, and it discusses the will of a Thomas Molyneux of Sefton here. And I've just highlighted every mention of a Molyneux on this page, and there's about 5 different spellings of the surname just on this one page. And then the other thing that you can also do is if you're looking at surnames with noble links, you might find some genealogies in newspapers as well. And we do actually find that on the next slide. So at one point when the Earl of Sefton died, this newspaper in 1855 published details about the genealogy of the Earls of Sefton and the Molyneux, and the fact that, they came over with William the Conqueror. And I just feel like I don't even know if that's true. I find it very, very amusing that, if it's a noble family and the name sounds even a little bit French, of course they came over with William the Conqueror. I don't know. I'm taking that with a bag of salt as well. And that's just a little bit of a delve into the origins of the surname Molyneux. There you go.
When I saw that that's the surname you were going to speak about, I did not think it was going to be one from your family tree. So that's very interesting that it's a Molyneux in your family tree. I think it's, like I say, it was definitely French, and it does have that sort of noble sounding aspect. I can see where the William the Conqueror is being drawn from, because it does have that sort of ring to it as well. And I would also just like to say that maybe I know more about Shakespeare than I'm letting on, because Rosie has dropped there that Emery Molyneux, supposedly his globes map had an influence on Shakespeare's writing. So maybe I'm a Shakespeare buff after all. I was just slightly off where I thought it was a character.
Well done, Liam. Well done, Rosie.
I'm taking credit for that as if I knew that guy even existed. When I said that out loud, I think I was thinking of someone totally different, but it's in there somewhere.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to nominate a surname for next time we do this segment, please feel free to throw it into the comments, and we will try and oblige. I just needed a name at the drop of a hat, and I just picked this one. So next time we'll do one of yours, and it'll be fun. And Karen says visitation records are a good source for early name usage as well. I will check those out as well. Thank you very much. Is the surname look up on the homepage, says Karen. So if you're on Findmypast, you scroll all the way down to the website footer. There's some links on the left-hand side, and one of them says surname origins. I don't think I pulled up the link for it, but I'll see if I can find them. I think we're at 1 minute to the hour, so I think we're actually going to have to be done for the day. I've got some links to throw in. I've got here, if anybody missed out on our Heritage Open Days event yesterday, we are offering you the chance to get the recorded talks from the day for free to your inbox, and these should be landing next week at some point. So I've got a link to sign up for these there. I've also got the Lee Miller collection that I'm putting in there if anybody wants to have a mooch. That has absolutely not worked on YouTube. It's sort of like split the link. I apologize. I'll just do the Lee Miller one again, because I want to make sure that you guys watching on YouTube have got the right one.
I'm just going to further add to the confusion and drop a little link to the surnames page as well. Just see how.
Oh, thank you, Liam. I was about to go find that. Thank you.
I'm glad YouTube survived.
So that's it for this week, you guys. I'm afraid we have run out of time, and I have to rush off because I actually have an appointment. But thank you very much for joining us today on the Family History Show with Findmypast. Thank you, Liam, for being my wonderful co-host.
Thank you for driving. It's my first time as a proper co-host and not having had to do any prep myself, so very much enjoyed it. Look forward to the next one.
You just get to read my notes and read my slides, and that's all the prep you have to do.
With my feet up, flicking over a page every now and then. It's great.
Next week, it should be Jen back with you. I think I will double check the schedule, but it should be Jen back with the family history expert hour. So be sure to tune back in for that. I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend, and we will see you next week. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.